All right, so the Reds, look, we talked a lot about them yesterday. We talked all the look. We spent time on this already. The national media is super high on what the Reds have done. We just seem to be a little bit behind on the optimism and excitement because I think we were expecting a little bit more. I think we've been waiting on that splash move, and I don't think that splash move is coming. But I do think when you add all the pieces together that they've added, I do think it's a significantly better ball club than a year ago at this time, and we probably should. But that was the conversation at this point yesterday. But since then, the Reds have made a couple more additions, and the most notable one, of course, being Taylor Rogers. And I'll send it to you guys on this. We talked about it with Charlie Goldsmith yesterday. We keep talking about the outfield, and we keep talking about like the bigger names that we want to see. But one thing we haven't spent time on at all is the bullpen. They add Brady Singer to the rotation. Obviously, you look at the fact that they do the qualifying offer and bring him back. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. They finally address the bullpen. They bring Rogers over. Where are you guys at with this type of move? Is this the type of move that finally gets you to say, okay, you have my attention. I'm ready to buy in now?
Yeah, I think everyone was focused on bats and outfield bats, but bullpen was a big need. And getting a guy like Rogers for half of his contract for basically nothing prospect-wise, all due respect to whoever we traded. But this is a great move for the Reds, and it seems like they're trying to, spin the tires on stuff. Even if they did miss out on some of the big guys in free agency, they're trying to add where they can. And I think that's, something that we should applaud.
We discussed it with Charlie yesterday. Was that yesterday? God, my days are all confused. We discussed it with Charlie Goldsmith, and we brought up the bullpen. I thought it was a serious area of concern that hasn't really been talked about at all this offseason. We've talked about the outfielder. We've talked about guys like Gavin Lux. We've talked about starting pitching, bringing in Brady Singer. We've talked about the defense. We've talked about just about everything except for the bullpen and what that's going to look like this year, because I think there are so many question marks. And yesterday, surely enough, they make several, I would say, sizable moves. I know people are going to, not discuss the Ian Jabot thing seriously, and that's fine. I'm not the biggest Ian Jabot guy in the world, but I might be the biggest Ian Jabot guy in the world.
I think you are.
I think you are.
But Ian Jabot was a solid piece for the Reds. I mean, he ate as many innings as one could possibly eat, while also pitching at a serviceable level. And then you bring in Taylor Rogers, who I think is really one of the game's, best relievers. Last year with the Giants, 2.4 ERA in 64 games. That's 60 innings pitched. He was an all-star, 4 years ago? I think this guy is pretty damn solid, and especially for what this bullpen is. And that's a bullpen that's probably young, not a lot of star names. This is a veteran relief pitcher who's going to be able to come in clutch situations towards the end of the game and get the job done. That's a big piece. You lose Fernando Cruz, you lose your eighth inning guy, and I think you just found your new one in Taylor Rogers.
Yeah, and then the other signing they made yesterday, Wade Miley in the minor leagues. We talked about it yesterday on the show. It happened while we were live, but I think that's another underrated move that'll get brushed under the rug with a lot of the other things happening. Getting a guy like that I know he's battling back from Tommy John, and we probably remember him a little bit more fondly than the other 29 teams in the MLB because of that no-hitter, but I think having a guy like Wade Miley in your minor leagues waiting to come up, being a depth piece for the starting rotation, I think that's just as crucial as a lot of the other things we've done this season.
One thing I remember we talked a lot about last year, or at least coming out of the season, was like, okay, the exciting part about the Reds was just the youth and the youth movement there. But then, Joey Votto, when he retired, that was the veteran that we talked about the most. But there was no veteran leadership with that group last year at all. No guys to show the young guys how to go out and get it done. We're looking for the big names. They're not there. But the fact that you get a Brady Singer who's been around for a while, the fact that you get, Austin Hayes, who's a veteran outfielder, like, the one thing that you could tell as being an emphasis on this team is, yes, improving a lot of the deficiencies from last year, but they're giving Terry Francona, an experienced manager, experienced veteran players, and I think that's going to go a long way as well. We want the big names. I completely get it. But I do think the experience on top of the replacement players they've got is pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so. And, again, I don't know who was the guy. Do we know anything about the guy that we traded? I think he was just.
I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him. We got another guy too today that I wish I knew who he was. But yeah, good for the Reds. Good for the Cincinnati Reds. They look to be competitive next year. I think it's funny how 2 days ago I gave the Reds, I think, a C-. Since then they've made like 5 moves.
Yeah.
So back up to a B. We're up to a B. They've improved. They've absolutely improved the roster. So. Good for the Reds.
I'll throw the grenade. What's the grade if they get Luis Robert?
We go up to an A.
Yeah, I thought that was the answer.
We go up to an A, and we're going to be all the way back in. It was Albert Abreu, by the way. They just signed to a minor league deal as of 30 minutes ago. Has been in the league for a couple years. I don't know if he's going to actually contribute to this club a ton, but another signing nonetheless. So Nick Krall still working at it, still absolutely working at it.
Year after year, offseason after offseason, everyone just sits back and gets crawled, and month after month. So, they just let him cook.
It's funny, and by the way, get crawled was an insult all last season. Everyone just oh man, they got crawled. I think getting crawled right now is actually almost like a sign of optimism. Like all these teams getting crawled. Look, and the Austin Hayes deal, by the way, we do find out. The pitcher that they got yesterday in Rogers, we do find out as well. Like he had a $12 million price tag, and they're willing to pay. Sending him over, they're going to pay $6 million of that. So the Reds are getting that experienced bullpen piece for only $6 million. So they saved that right there. But that's what the Reds are doing. They're taking advantage of some priced up players around the league. Completely get that. But the move that they didn't make yesterday, you just brought the name up a little bit ago, Jacob, but the Reds were, I guess, close, according to a couple MLB reporters out there, but they just couldn't agree on the money and they couldn't agree on the players. But I think the story there was the Reds were trying to swing for the fences, whatever that means, because, again, you can be kicking the tires on it, but how aggressive are you willing to be? This was the first time we heard of a player, a top prospect for the Reds, that they were willing to move on from. Edwin Arroyo was a name that was being thrown around in a trade with the White Sox, but the deal couldn't be done because of money. But I thought the biggest takeaway from that is, yes, they're going after a big name, but secondly, they were willing to part ways with a top prospect, something that we felt like they weren't willing to do for the longest time.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. I said earlier this offseason that I was done giving Reds the credit for being in on these big guys. They have to actually do something, but there's a little bit more meat on this Luis Robert bone than there was on the Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander when they just kind of threw the Reds' names in there with a list of the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Blue Jays and whoever else to sign these guys. And though we were in the mix in the last five or whatever, I never really thought we had a chance. This one feels like it was close. Ken Rosenthal reporting that it came down to just money, and that's about as close as you can get. And it's a pretty frustrating spot to be if you're a Reds fan, to hear that money is a potential hang-up when you're not really paying a whole lot of people and you have a chance to get someone who could be a real star, a real big addition for the next 3 years. This is a multi-year contract with Luis Robert, so I think it would be a perfect move for the Reds. If it was prospects and value you're giving up for it, that's a different story. If it came down to money and the Reds were hung up on $15 million versus $25 million or whatever the difference was, that's a really tough pill to swallow. But until we know for sure, I am going to give the Reds some credit for being in on Luis Robert, just for spinning the tires after missing out on those big outfielders. This is what I said yesterday, and we clipped it up and tweeted it, and some people agreed and some people didn't. But I said Austin Hayes is a signing you make to be a depth piece when you need the outfielders the Reds need. And if they went and got Luis Robert, maybe that would have done away with the Austin Hayes signing. But in theory, that still applies. You go get your star, and then you have another guy to help fill some depth roles. So I think Luis Robert would be awesome. I know there's injury concerns, which there are with a lot of the Reds organization, but there's not often that you can get a guy like that for a couple prospects, at least his ceiling. So I would be thrilled.
Now, Austin Hayes still has yet to be officially signed, right?
Right, and
so we're still waiting for it.
That's the thought process. In Rosenthal's article, he said the Reds shifted from Robert to Austin Hayes when those conversations started to deteriorate. So without the official announcement, I guess maybe we're still waiting on potentially being back in on Robert. But people did point out that Carlos Estevez, the reliever from the Phillies that we were connected to, he signed a contract right after we signed or traded for Taylor Rogers.
Yeah.
And the combined value of Hayes and Rogers equaled basically what Estevez made. So the thought process there a lot of people are having is, are the Reds potentially maxed out? And they were using those funds on one of those two places. And when they found the Rogers-Hayes versus the just Estevez or just Luis Robert, they preferred the two to the one. So not entirely sure where the truth is in that, but at least something to watch until they officially announce Austin Hayes.
It looks like it's a 6-year, $50 million deal for Robert with a 26 and 27 team option. I don't know, if that's the number, that's what? That's not that much money, I don't think.
I think he came out to $20 million a year for the last 3 years.
Okay, so it is pushed to the back. All right, that makes more sense. Anyway, Robert's, listen, last year played 100 games, wasn't the best player in the world. I would say probably his worst year, maybe as a big leaguer. But the year before that, I mean, he's an all-star. You hit 38 home runs for the White Sox. You play 145 games. This is a guy that does have injury concerns. He played pretty much a full season in 2020 and pretty much a full season in 2023. Outside of those two, he's gotten 3 seasons with, I would say, an incomplete on those seasons. So it is an area of concern where, as a guy who preaches constantly that the Reds have to be healthy, they have to be available to play for the entirety of this season, it certainly is a risk. My argument to that would be Edwin Arroyo would play probably 0 games this year. So,
And next?
And maybe next. And also, I don't know where Edwin Arroyo plans to play if Matt McClain and Ellie De La Cruz are the middle infielders. Maybe he plays third base. I don't know.
I do think he's the best position player prospect we have. And I don't even know if that's like a take. I think it's more of a fact. And that might be a tough thing to swallow if you're where the Reds are at. And with the comments we've seen coming out about re-signing Ellie, I know that's a long way down the line. And I know Charlie Goldsmith said it's the most tired topic in Reds radio right now. But you might want to look at holding on to some of those younger middle infielders if you know 4 years down the line you're not going to have Ellie De La Cruz to shortstop. So I don't know how much that's coming into play, but I would also argue if you know you aren't going to re-sign Ellie, trade everyone and go all in on a 3 or 4 year window because it's the best chance you're going to have. So I see both ends of the coin.
Craig did confirm $15 million this year with 2 club options for $20 million each of the next 2 years. So hypothetically, they could, just not opt in. If they wanted to.
If you're going to give up an Arroyo, then you would certainly opt in.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Unless they win a World Series, who knows?
Or extend.
Yeah. I listen. It's an exciting move. I hope the Reds don't give up on it because I would like to see it. It would be a move that brings me all the way back. It's that outfielder that we all hoped. Again, you're betting on a guy to be healthy, but at the end of the day, you're betting that with every single one of your other players too. So I don't think it's that crazy of a deal. I wouldn't hate it. I would welcome it, and I'm hoping Nick Krall has got a little bit more magic up his sleeve. I think yesterday we were talking about it, and Kinner kind of brought it up before the segment. It's like, that big splash, is it ever going to come? Slowly but surely, we're getting all these little big splashes here, medium-sized splashes, and it's making me very excited for the Red season because I don't think they're done. I don't think they're done yet, and I think there's a couple more moves left to be made. We'll see if they can close this Robert thing or we can actually sign Austin Hayes. Either way, the Reds have done an impressive job at improving their roster. I saw that yesterday on Twitter. I was looking around X.com, shout out X. It's all happening on X.
It is.
And I saw our good friend Obscure Reds, he started tweeting out, why are people so upset? Why are people so frustrated? They've objectively improved their roster, and they have. Up until the past couple of days, though, they hadn't really addressed some big areas of this team. Now they have. You bring in Taylor Rogers to help the bullpen. You bring in Austin Hayes or whoever they get for the outfield. You bring in Ian Jabot. You bring in Wade Miley. You bring in a bunch of these guys that are going to have depth for this team. And I don't know. I'm starting to talk myself into the playoffs. If we can get one more, I'm going to start talking myself into it. I'm not there yet, but I'm really, really close.
Is 2025 the year of optimistic Elliott?
It might be. It might just have to be.
Is the world ready for that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the world's ready for it.
If you and Nick Kirby combine forces to support the Reds, it might be over.
Listen, if Kirby and I both were positive, the world might burn. I don't know what would happen. The sun would explode.
We'd win a World Series.
Yeah, probably. Tyler says, Elliot, do I still want Taylor Ward? Sure, I would love Taylor Ward. If the price is as cheap as what I read about on X.com, I think they were giving that guy away. So, yeah, I'd love Taylor Ward. Now, if you're going to get Luis Robert, is it Robert or Robert? It's killing me. It's killing me.
I've been saying Roberts.
Yeah,
I'm
going to go back to Robert. You stick with Robert. One of us has to be right.
I would say I'll learn it if we get him.
We have to pay attention. Anyway, Luis Robert, I would love him. I would absolutely love him. So if you're going to get him, Taylor Ward, one more outfielder, I think that's what you need. We're one more outfielder away from having a pretty complete roster. So good for Nick Krall, man. I had my doubts on Nick Krall, and every single time he seemingly shuts me up.